like there's this tendency to think about race because it's like, okay, what music do Black people listen to? What music do white people listen to? And the recording industry sort of created that, segregated the music industry essentially, and that's kind of been something that has been very challenging to break those barriers. I grew up also listening to like, punk and alternative music too. So, I was always in these, mostly white spaces, not fully understanding like my presence in these spaces shouldn't be an anomaly. This is all part of a bigger history.
When I initially got started and decided that I was going to pursue a career in country music, it was actually because of my two managers at the time. When I was 17, I was signed to two Black women who had a company called Us Girls Entertainment out of St. Louis. That's where I'm from. And they were the ones that encouraged me. They knew that I loved the music. They knew that I used to write country songs, but I never really thought that it was a viable option for me because I didn't really see anyone that looked like me. And so, with the exception of Charlie Pride, that was really it at that time.
I think it's important for people to be able, for Black women to be able to see, yes, to be able to see themselves in represented in all forms of media. A Black person's presence in country music is historically, it's part of that history. So having that knowledge, and also, I don't think that by default you need to have a birthright in order to participate or play or listen to a certain kind of music. There's a richer history there that isn't really talked about that much. And then I would explain, about finding out that the banjo is a descendant of a West African instrument, and clawhammer banjo, and a lot of the different banjo rhythms that combine with the Celtic, British Isles style fiddling. That both of these continents like essentially created what would be known as string band music. And then, obviously you've got bluegrass, country, and all of those different things that kind of are offshoots of that sort of fiddle and banjo tradition.
I mean, at the very beginning, they were the exact same thing. And it was blues and country were hand in hand. They were cousins. I think they were closer than cousins. They were brothers. And capitalism and industry split them off, and blues became race records and country music became hillbilly records. And so that's why a lot of the early country music that you hear, like for example, Let the Circle Be Unbroken. Let the Circle Be Unbroken is a song that, we've been singing in Baptist churches since the beginning of time. And a lot of the early songs were derivatives of work songs. They were derivative of gospel songs. So country music and R&B and blues are very, very closely related. Like a lot of people call country music white man's blues, which is a terrible thing to call it.
There's an artist whose name is, I will probably say her last name wrong, Amethyst Kaya. And she's fascinating to me because she's from Chattanooga, and she's Black, and she's also a lesbian. And she talked about how she grew up listening to country music, but she didn't think that she could make it herself because nobody looked like her.
Obviously, if I'm going to mostly white spaces, and there's always the question of how did I get into bluegrass, is what usually people would say, because the name of the program I came from was Bluegrass Old Time and Country Music. So a lot of people would say, how'd you get into playing bluegrass? Here at the Bluegrass Old Time Country Music program played a pivotal role in being able to connect with the wider music community and to be able to make a career being a full-time musician. For me, that was the beginning. I was finally going to be able to be in an environment where I can study music and also have my way of learning music be appreciated. For me, it was about just getting out there and playing the music. And if I was in those situations where somebody was like, how'd you get into this? Then I can explain, well, I actually got into it because I realized that historically there is a connection there.
And when we first came to Nashville, there's a lot of curiosity about who are these three Black women coming in here and trying to get in. And you know, there were a lot of people that were extremely skeptical. I think a lot of the initial meetings that I had were people just trying to see if it was for real. I was met with a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity, and a lot of questions in the very beginning. It wasn't like overt. Like I think a lot of people think that you know, it would have been like overt racism or anything like that. It wasn't that. It was just very very small things like, well, we have to find songs for someone like you. Or we just have to figure out a way to make you relatable to the audience, someone like you relatable, and that sort of thing. And so that was the talk for years when I came to town. Oh, I think the questions and the authenticity tests and all that sort of thing definitely affected my art. I took it personally because you tend to want to think that you don't want it to be race. You don't ever want it to be race. You don't want you know, rejection or anything to be based on anything other than your talent. And so I took it personally, and I was just like, well, obviously I need to become a better singer. Obviously I need to become a better songwriter. So for a long time it motivated me. And so I internalized it and tried to turn it into, use my work ethic to try to get over it.
You know, we can foster this idea of like, hey, we're not restricted to these sort of narrow definitions of what it means to be Black and what it means to be white. We can just, you know, and again, not to, you know, obviously the issues of race relations and how we're moving forward is going to be a point of contention because that was established 400 years ago.